Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Mighty Blaze, where we connect readers and writers in the age of COVID and beyond. My name is Trisha Blanchette, and I'm so excited to welcome today's very special guest, Dr. Anne Garvin. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. This is kind of a dream. I've been watching you guys and I'm watching all the interviews, and it's just great to be here. Thank you.
Well, we're so excited to have you here. And now I'm going to embarrass you just a little bit by reading your very impressive bio. No false modesty. It is very, very impressive.
Okay.
Anne Garvin, PhD, is the USA Today best-selling author of 4 novels. I Like You Just Fine When You're Not Around, The Dog Year, On Maggie's Watch, and her newest book, which just released this week, I Thought You Said This Would Work. She teaches writing at not 1, but 2 universities, the University of Wisconsin and Drexel University. Mm-hmm. She's also worked as a registered nurse and taught exercise physiology and many other topics at the university level. And if all that wasn't enough, Anne is also the founder of Tall Poppy Writers, and she's soon releasing a podcast. So, wow, that's a lot of stuff. But today we are here to celebrate this little beauty. I Thought You Said This Would Work. I've been telling people about this book all week. I'm calling it like a Thelma and Louise for the 2020s because it's about a crazy wild road trip and it's lots of fun, badass women, but it's also very poignant and touching. And for me, I thought it read like a love letter of support from you to other hardworking women. Would you say that's an accurate reading, or am I just reading into it what I want to read into it?
No, that's a dream come true statement for me. Like that is such a dream come true statement for me. And I'll tell you why. When I was teaching at the university, I was teaching a lot of things related to the psychology of health and that kind of thing. And I always, the thing that I want most for people is to feel better about being a human in all ways. I don't think it helps anyone to feel bad about their frailties or bad about their humanness. And so whenever I write a book, I want to show the world that it's okay to have flaws and weaknesses, and it's okay to support each other and be frustrated with each other and love each other and be a human in those relationships rather than a perfect person in those relationships. And so when you say that, it is a love letter. It's a love letter for all the women and men, because the men are treated very well in the book too, that are just, they're doing their diligence. They're making it in the world. They're taking care of their people. And I want them to know that it's okay. It's all good. We love you.
And they're not perfect while they're doing it by any stretch.
No, and they're so not perfect. Nobody is, right? Thank God. They wouldn't be interesting.
Right. The story is written from Samantha's point of view in the first person. So we obviously get to know her the best. Mm-hmm. I loved how she's sort of brutally honest. And she acknowledges, like, she does selfless things selfishly because she doesn't want to be alone. She doesn't want to be lonely. So she acts very selfless so she doesn't lose people and things like that. We also learn, very interesting to me, about the ambivalence she has about her husband's untimely death. Mm-hmm. So a stereotypical way of describing that would be, the wailing widow and all that. That's not what we get here. And I found that so interesting. And Samantha's clearly the star, but the other characters were so fully realized as well. And I was wondering if you do detailed character studies before you start, like some authors do, or do you just wing it? Or how do you go about that?
The way that I write is that I get the story down. And I know who those characters are and what they want and what their major disbelief is about themselves, like what they think is true, but maybe isn't necessarily true, what they might have to learn at the end. I know in the beginning that. And then I try to figure out who are those people, like what made them who they are. And then it's like painting a wall. I layer it and layer it and layer it. And they come forth from the layering, and they sort of become a 3D character after I've worked on them a little bit. So I would say I have a sense of them, but I don't do, I find that if I do too much of a character development, that gets in the way of my story sort of telling itself. And I really want those characters to help me discover who they are while I write them, which sounds very woo-woo, but I have to say that is how it happens.
Right. Sometimes they talk to you for sure.
They do. Like, and sometimes, once you get it right after a couple or 3 different edits, they almost are like, yeah, you got it now. Finally. God, that took you a long time. We've been whispering in your ear this entire time.
Right. And revisions, like your first draft, they're a certain way. Second or third draft, by the 4th draft, you don't even recognize that person that was in the first draft. No, they were like, they're a cardboard cutout at first, like a paper character at first. And it's really, for me, it's just to get the story down, in, like the infrastructure down. Because for me, really, I mean, the plot follows from the character. But the depth of the character comes in revision. Definitely. So this story takes us on a crazy, madcap, winding road trip that was so much fun. And to be honest, after this 1.5 years of utter lockdown, it was exactly what I needed. I really, really enjoyed it. And I was wondering did you do like a road trip research at some point, or was this all from your imagination? How did it all come about?
It's every single thing in my life is still stored up in my brain. And I think sometimes it just has to get shit loose, right? And so, I do. I've done a lot of road trips with my family. I've gone on a lot of vacations with friends. I've gone on vacations with friends who have irritated me. I've gone on vacations with friends who are great. Like, I just kind of put it all together in my mind, and then it all came out on the paper. I would say that I really understand. I would say that I really love and understand the complex relationships of women, and I try to bring that out when I'm writing it. And then, and I just put them in a car. And I'm annoyed by road trips mostly. Like, I don't love them because I can't really, I'm not good at just sitting, and I'm a disruptor. Like, I annoy people. I get lost, and I talk too much, and I put the music on, and then I shut it off. So I think that I might be the most annoying person in a road trip. So
I think a few of these characters had a few of those qualities in them.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. People are people wherever they are. Right.
Right. I would definitely say that you understand the complexities of women and women's relationships, and they really are so incredibly complex. And in this story, obviously you amp it up and make it really crazy, but just at the root of it, the misunderstandings, the stubbornness, the jealousies, all those things. Yeah. Another thing that you obviously really understand is animals. Yes. And, animals, dogs in particular, play a very, very big role in this book. I personally was so excited to see Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, which is a real place in Utah.
It is.
Used as a setting in this book because I am an animal rescue geek. And I will admit, I did take a trip to Best Friends a while back. And I spent a few days volunteering at Dogtown. They call it Dogtown and Cat Town and I don't know, Rabbit Town, Horse Town, other things. Yeah. I was 5 months pregnant at the time, so they only let me work with the elderly dogs. So it was me and like 15-year-old dogs, but it was great. Your descriptions were absolutely spot on, not only of the place, but the people, because this is a quirky environment.
It's a very quirky group of people.
So here's where I throw in my shameless plug for a nonprofit that I started called Operation Delta Dog, where we do similar work. So we rescue shelter dogs and train them to work as service dogs for veterans who suffer from brain injury and PTSD. And we have found these dogs have an almost magical healing ability for physical problems and mental challenges. And I was wondering if you had found that through your work in the medical field as well.
I unfortunately did not get to work with dogs, and I worked at a veteran hospital, which is, when I was a nurse, my first work was with veterans. And I can just tell you that I loved those veterans more than anybody. I mean, they were just they're complex and difficult too, but they're so grateful. Like I found them to be so grateful. Not that I need that gratefulness, but it was just, they were really touching, such touching men and women. But I will say, so for me years ago, so I didn't really have, I had pets when I was younger, and then I had a cat, but then later on we got a Labradoodle named Millie. And I was in the middle of a very difficult thing in my marriage, like super difficult. And we got Millie, and I brought Millie to the dog park, and I watched her run with so much joy that she reminded me what joy was. Like in that, I remember watching her run and thinking, oh, that's what it is. Like, oh my gosh, that's what joy is. So I would say that my dog Millie really brought joy back into my life. And then help me understand, how magical and intuitive and wonderful animals are, and how much they can heal you when you need something to be healed a little bit, and the world isn't really doing it.
Absolutely.
So I think what you're doing with Delta Dog, like I want to go visit. I want to see that. I want to do my next novel there because it's so fantastic. Like I love it. I didn't know about it until you told me about it, and I was all over it today. So
and they feel such a special bond because the veterans have been through so much, but these are rescue dogs, many of whom have also been through so much, and they just seem to like heal each other. It's incredible.
I love that so much, and I just think the thing about dogs and animals is that they're non-judgmental devotion, which is really what we should have for ourselves. And what I hope is that oftentimes when we look at dogs, we're doing a mirroring of how we need and want to look at ourselves, the way that they look at us. And if we can, and I have always believed, like if you can love yourself like you love your animals, it is such, and I've always said, I say this a lot when I'm talking to people about how to manage their weight or how to help their body esteem, that if you can think about your body as your dog, like just your absolute best friend who wants to be there for you, you'll spend less time hurting it or degrading it or saying a nasty word about it, because you would never look at your dog and poke him in the belly and say, you're fat, you're ugly. Yeah. Never, right? You're laughing because it's outrageous. So for me, like it really helped me see a little bit about, that maybe we can all love each other in the way that animals love us. I know that's sort of pie in the sky, but boy, I really feel that way.
I agree. And we should mention that actually tonight, this very night, is the big fundraiser for Best Friends. They're having a concert.
Oh, it is.
Called Songs to Save Them All, with big stars like Emmylou Harris and many others. So our amazing producer, Julie, will pop that link into the chat so everybody can click it and find out more information, and also find out more about Operation Delta Dog if you're so inclined.
That's awesome. I didn't know that tonight. I've been a little under that. I've been in my own space. Yeah.
But back to your book.
Yep.
Another theme I noticed that ran throughout was the theme of people pleasing and conflict avoidance, which often go together. Yeah. And many, many people can relate, like me.
Yep.
And Samantha gives up so much to make other people happy, which so many of us do. But you don't make that seem pathetic. You make it seem very compassionate and relatable. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read a little quote from the book about this.
No, I don't mind a bit.
So she's thinking about all her years of people pleasing. And she says, after years of this practice, I felt like there might be a reservoir of unspoken retorts somewhere in my body, ready to burst. Perhaps sometime in the far future, I'd go in to have brain surgery. The doctor would be concentrating and cut into a blob on my frontal lobe, and a loud stream of saucy comebacks would scream from within. That just grabbed me, because that's how I feel sometimes. Like you have this pent-up stuff and you're just not saying it, but it's all there somewhere. And it just to have you come up with that imaginative way of expressing that just cracked me up. Why did you want to address those themes here?
Well, women are caregivers. And, Deborah Tannen is a linguist, and she wrote a book called You Just Don't Understand Me. And it's a quite older book, and it's a terrific book. And one of the things she says is that women's whole goal in their conversation is to build community and connection, whereas men, and no offense to the men because this sounds negative, but it's also very necessary, is to understand who's in charge, where's the hierarchy, who's going to take over, right? So that difference is a really enormous difference. And I think over years, what ends up happening is women, in service of what our communication goals are, community and connection, will often bite their tongue to anything that would be a disservice to that. And because we're caregivers and we don't want to hurt other people's feelings, often we will put their feelings ahead of our own. And then, we bite our tongues. We get, breast cancer and abusive relationships. We have, and there's a place, right, for, making your inside voice your inside voice. But there is also a place where you stop and say, I don't love that, what you just said. And I think often we don't say that. And I don't think it's a pathetic thing. I think it's in service of a kindness. But sometimes that kindness goes wrong and we don't give ourselves that kindness. We don't set the boundaries that we need to. So conflict avoidance and that kind of thing it's great in some circumstances, but it can really be hard because you don't know where the boundary is. Like I always say that I should write a memoir that's called Bad with Boundaries. But then I got a little better at boundaries. And then I think the memoir should maybe say, maybe okay with boundaries now. I don't know, but I think that women are like this all the time. And so as a function of that, when women turn a little like older, you're 60, they've had it. So they're not willing. They're like, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. That's not crazy. I think that they realized that they lost a lot of things by giving up some of that. And I wanted to talk about that in a real way because I think that it's great and awful at the same time.
And when someone who is a people pleaser suddenly stands up for themselves, it causes a lot of backlash too.
Yeah, you lose a lot of relationships, frankly. Yeah. Because you aren't who you were anymore that built that relationship. And that relationship is probably unsustainable unless you are the one that's going to, allow everyone else to walk over you. So I think it's stuff that we all have to sort of learn for ourselves, what's okay and what's not.
Yeah. And Samantha also struggles with lots of midlife challenges and parenting challenges, primarily the looming empty nest, which I have a 17-year-old. So this is also very, very close to home here. Her daughter, Maggie, is preparing to leave and she's trying to come to terms with that. And I was hoping to read one more short note from here about that. This is on. So Samantha is trying to deal with her empty nest. So what does she do but Google it to try to solve this problem, as we all do. And she lands on the website for the Mayo Clinic, which just cracks me up in itself. But this is what she said. Mayo said, I should accept the timing of my child leaving, keep in touch, seek support, and stay positive. This seemed like good advice for, say, when your lawn guy moves to Arizona. Not for the syndrome where you lose your cellular equivalent, the person who fed off your breast for a year, the one person you could always call your own, my daughter, even if it was to finish the sentence with, my daughter is annoyed by me. I just love that. And the parenting stuff continues throughout. We have one person experiencing the joy of having a child for the first time. We have one person experiencing grief because they want to have a child and cannot. And then we have Samantha, who's very honest about, how exhausting and often thankless this job of mothering is. Did you intentionally set out to portray parenthood from all those different angles, or did that just evolve?
God, I wish I had. I wish I had, because how brilliant would that have been? It was pretty magical. Yeah, it was pretty accidental. I think that, I have motherhood on the mind for many reasons. I have friends without children. I have friends with children. And I think that often we glorify both situations in ways that they shouldn't be glorified necessarily. I think you know, being a parent is really been one of the most wonderful things in my life, and I would never give it up. However, it's also one of the most annoying things in my life. So I think that, you know, I think it's really important to really say those things. You know, I think it's important to say those things. And because I think a lot of women, they maybe won't say it for themselves, but if I say it, then they can like silently cheer and go, that's how I feel. You know, somebody else heard me say that. Thank goodness. And I always say that, you know, when you're a fiction writer, the best thing about being a fiction writer is that you can have all your hard things that you want to talk about and put them in your character's mouth so that you don't have to take responsibility for them.
Absolutely.
So in some ways, I do that.
Sure.
Yeah. Like, what do you mean? I made that up.
Unless you're, memoirists can't do that. Just fiction.
No, they can't.
So you are the founder of something called Tall Poppy Writers. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what it is?
Yeah, I will. So in 2010, when my first novel came out, I thought that everything would change. Like I thought, oh, okay, now I'm Anita Shreve and I'll get a scarf and a beach house and I'll be awesome, right? And instead I got pneumonia and a divorce on the same day of the book coming out. Yeah.
Nice.
And, you know, I came from science and wrote a novel. So I didn't have any connections in publishing. I didn't know any other authors. I knew nothing. And this was sort of in 2010, you know, like the self-publishing people really knew what to do, but the traditional publishing people, we knew a lot less about how to talk about our books. And I thought, no one's buying this book. Nobody even knows about me. I can't even get in my hometown newspaper of 2,000 people because they keep bumping my story because some 8th grader keeps making a 3-pointer. So I thought, what in the heck? And then I thought, this must be what happens to women and their voices all the time. Because if I'm going to have a choice between taking care of my parents were very ill at the time, taking care of my parents, taking care of my children, or traveling to a bookstore and talk about my book to someone, I have to choose my family. And I thought, this is why women's voices get muted. This is why women's voices, you know, because we carry the load, the emotional load, and also the daily load of our families' lives. And I thought, that is crazy. I got very sort of up in arms feminist about it. And then I saw what bands do, which is they have, you know, like they have an opening band with a larger band. And I thought, well, that's what we should be doing because books come out at different times. So one person can be held up and the other ones can work their way up and publish a book and then it's their turn. And so I pitched it to the few authors that I met during that couple of years when I was waiting for my next book to come out. And then I created the Tall Poppy Writers to help women writers who would be struggling with obscurity, essentially. And, you know, where we say everybody gets to grow. I wanted a place where people, because writing should not be a competition. It's not a competition. And, but of course, it feels like a competition all the time.
It does.
And I don't like competition. I'm an ambitious person, but I'm not a competitive person. Competition actually makes me wither because, you know, I was in track in high school. I came in last every race. I don't want to go through that again. So I put the Tall Poppies together in as many, you know, keeping cross genres and trying to get women to that really generous women with a motor who might be willing to join us. And that's where it kind of started.
So is that and then place for people to learn about new books coming out?
Yep. So that's what it is. We have, you know, we have a website, we have Facebook groups, we have Twitter and Instagram, and we all work to help each other publicize our novels. And I don't think I'm talking out of turn when I say that we changed the culture for authors, because there were places like romance writers were really good at working together, and some small, you know, historical fiction and cozies, they worked really well together. But I don't think there was a lot of place where cross genres got together and sort of elevated each other in a non-competitive way. Now you see it everywhere, it's the best thing in the world. Like everybody's helping everybody. Like it's the most wonderful thing to see, because I think authors before worked in silos, and I love that it's a little bit different now. So that's what the Tall Poppies is. We're a marketing group, thinly veiled as a sleepover party. It goes all day, every day.
How many people are involved?
Well, COVID really did a number on us. We lost a significant number of poppies for several reasons. And the business was, very difficult on some of our poppies. So we are pared down to about 30 right now. We're going to be bringing in some other voices, authors, and sort of support our ranks a little bit more and get back on our feet. COVID was tough on us for sure. Everybody was exhausted. All their kids were home. Exactly. They could barely write their books.
Yeah.
And then, the reason that you guys sort of came alive during this time was to help these authors during the most difficult time to launch books. And the way that you guys have done that, it really is a mighty blaze. It's fantastic.
Yeah. That's Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt.
Unbelievable.
Two novelists came together and said, how can we help people get out there during this weird time? And they just hit the road running. And here we are.
I know. I think we partnered with, in the beginning, we did some partnership, I think, with you guys. And, but I'm not sure how much we do as far as that's concerned, but we kind of fell apart too. We all fell apart a little bit.
Everybody fell apart.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
We're getting better now, but
we're better now. We're getting better now for sure.
Yeah. So one of the things I do for Mighty Blaze is we just started a podcast. So I host the podcast, but I hear you are also about to start a podcast. Is that true?
I am. So it just, so there's this group in LA called Speak.Studio, and they are, they're entering into the market with podcasts because they're going to have this amazing app. And I'm not actually allowed to talk about it, but they came to me and asked if I would be one of their originals. And one of the originals the thought is that like Netflix has their originals, and then there's all the other ones that kind of stream through Netflix. So, and they asked me if I would do a podcast, and I must have said no 10 times because I thought I can't even imagine doing a podcast on top of all of this. Right. What would I even do it on? Who would even listen? Nobody knows who I am. That would be crazy. And then little by little, they kind of wore me down. And I decided to do one called Come Sit By Me. And they're only 5 minutes. So every podcast is exactly, like between 5 and 6 minutes. And because I have been an educator for so many years, I have a whole folder of questions that people have asked me over the years that I've provided answers for. And so the mix of answers, the questions are things like, they're really a funny mix. Like what should I eat? What's the best exercise? Should I get a divorce? Is my nipple ring infected? They are the widest variety of questions related to health and writing a book that you could ever imagine. And I always say that health and writing a book is pretty connected because you have to stay healthy to write a book. You have to keep that body. Yeah. And so the things that I'm doing are sort of busting myths and putting into context things that other educators might teach. So they're not fact-based. They're sort of context-based. Mm-hmm. So like, for example, when someone says, what should I eat? The answer to that question is, you already know what you should eat. What you're asking me is, how do I eat what I know I should eat? And then we talk about that.
Or how do I not eat what I shouldn't eat?
Exactly. That's exactly. And what shouldn't I eat? Right. Because that's another question that people ask. That's kind of the wrong question. And so I reframe the questions as a health psychologist, and then we talk about it that way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I hear our producer, Tom, has some viewer questions for us.
Oh, great.
So let's get those on the screen. Who were the strong women from your childhood who continue to inspire you today?
Oh, that's such a great question.
That is a good one.
I know it's trite to say your mother, but I want to talk about my mother just for a minute. So she was a registered nurse and was the first class in Buffalo, New York to graduate in nursing. And then she was a nurse in the Army. My father was based in, I can't remember, Fort Bragg, I think, and she was a nurse down there. And then she had children and stopped nursing. But when we moved from New Jersey to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, she was in the first class to take a remote master's in medical surgical nursing from Wayne State University in Michigan.
Wow.
Yep, they brought it up to Marquette, and we lived even farther north. We lived 3 hours north of Marquette. And so my mom would drive down there, and then in the middle of the week, she'd work on all her stuff. So it was really remote learning without, computers at the time.
Right.
And she got a master's. And then she got a job at a community college teaching nursing that was about an hour and 15 minutes away.
Wow.
And again, without computers. And then she became the president. Then later they moved to New York, North Dakota, and she became the president of the North Dakota Nursing Association. And she met with Al Gore and Hillary Clinton to work on minimal practice education standards for nurses in North Dakota and to change those practices across the state. So,
wow.
and if you met my mom, she's not actually nothing like me. I'm much more like my father. She was just a kitty cat, the brightest, smartest kitty cat. And then she developed Alzheimer's and then had Alzheimer's for 20 years. So watching this brilliant woman slide into Alzheimer's was a very tough thing for me. But the kinds of industry and desire to help people really stuck with me over the years. And a lot of the wisdom that is written in my books certainly came from my mother.
Oh, that's
so I would say that my mom was probably one of the strongest women I ever knew, and in such a lovely package.
What a role model.
She was a role
model.
Great
story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoops, someone wants to know. Leslie wants to know, who were your childhood reading inspirations?
You know who I loved almost more than anything was the woman that now I'll forget, E.L. Kronenberg, the woman who wrote The Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler.
Oh.
That book to me was like the most amazing book. And then there was an English writer named something Howe, Howe, and she wrote The Children of Green Now, which was a book about a mansion that had children ghosts in there. I know, I loved it so much. And then, of course, Little Women, because I read Little Women, and I read all of the Prairie books.
Little House on the Prairie.
Yes, Little House on the Prairie, because they describe food so well.
Oh,
you remember they'd talk about the sugar cakes? Like, oh my gosh, I read all of those. I loved those. Charlotte's Web, you name it.
For me, it was Harriet the Spy. I loved Harriet.
Oh, Harriet the Spy. Anything that had a plucky, female character that had a little sass to her, I read all of those.
Right. There weren't too many, so when you saw them.
Yeah, no, right.
All right. We have another question. How did you switch from nursing to writing?
I'm one of the odd writers who didn't really write her whole life. I wrote letters my whole life, and I read my whole life. I went from nursing school to exercise physiology and then sports psychology school. And I was an educator and a researcher for years and years and years, but I really did maintain reading. Like, I was always a big reader. And then the Wisconsin Book Festival had a contest where it was a 24-hour book contest. And they sent you a picture, you had to write a story on it in 24 hours. I'd never done anything like that before. It was $10. I thought nobody will know that, I didn't do where nobody will know. Nobody will know. And I thought this will be fun. It'll just be a fun exercise. So they sent it on Friday. I wrote this story. I had my friend who was an English teacher put in all the punctuation. And then I went to a wedding in San Francisco, and they called me there and said, "You won second place." And honestly, it was the largest unadulterated joy I've felt since having my children, but my children hurt. So this was joy without pain.
What was the picture?
I couldn't believe it. And it was this great picture of a ratty old, one person movie kiosk. And there was it was on a dirt road with a fence, and there was a movie screen and a gangster on it. And two people, not women, but you couldn't tell who it was embracing inside it in a light. And I just wrote a story about a 16-year-old girl who was ready to leave for college the next day and hadn't told her boyfriend yet. and her boyfriend didn't show up until the last line of the story.
Oh,
so yeah. So I that was like finding a superhero cloak in my closet. Like, and it was, you know, there were professors that had all the professors from Milwaukee that had judged it, and I mean the joy I felt there was so amazing that I got the bug and I couldn't stop writing, and that was in 2004. So I went from nursing to professor and teaching to writing later, and then just pursued it. I just loved it.
It's like finding a new room inside your house.
It is unbelievable. Yeah. Yep.
Another question. At what point in your story ideas do wait. At what point
you sit down and start writing? Yeah.
Now, in your story ideas, do you actually sit down to start writing them? So I guess how long do you percolate the ideas before you start writing them?
That's a great question. Sometimes they percolate a long time without me even thinking about it, like something that just keeps like tapping on my brain. But what I'll do usually is, and the first thing I do is I think of who this character is going to be, this primary character, and I have a premise to the story. So in this case, it was somebody has to go cross country to pick up a dog, right? And then I do what the first thing I do is I write the paragraph that's going to go on the back of the book. But we don't always use that paragraph, but that's how I first conceptualize the book.
Well, that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. And then after that, I sort of take a microscope into that. And then I start to write an outline that outlines the story in terms of a very traditional plot structure, like inciting incident, build up, pinch point one, midpoint reversal. And I write down what I think this character is going to go through to get it. It's like a outline, I guess, only written more in terms of, knowing very clearly what a structure is for a plot or a novel or a 3-act play.
So it's somewhere between plotting and pantsing.
Yes. And then, after I do that, then I start to imagine, where does this story start? And then I start to write right there.
That's sometimes the hardest part is knowing where does it start?
Where does it start? Where does this book start? And I try to do it almost like the thing about writing a story that winning that contest was what it opened up for me is, Anne, if you visualize a scene like that piece of art, you can write a story. But without that visualization for me, I probably wouldn't have been able to do it. Like that was the entry point for me. I'm a very visual person. And
I thought this was a very visual story as well. And I'm picturing it as a movie.
Oh gosh, your words to God's ears.
And I'm wondering who do you think is going to play Samantha, Holly, and Summer, our crazy trio on the road?
Well, I want Tina Fey to play Samantha.
That would be great.
I know, right?
So great. Yeah.
And, I was thinking that the dream team would be, Amy Poehler as Holly and then Kristen Wiig as Summer Silva.
Oh, yeah. The SNL group.
Yeah. I just think that they would be so funny at it. But I have other thoughts too about I don't think Amy Poehler is quite right for Holly. It has to be somebody more stern, maybe who's the one from, I should know this woman's name. She's so famous. Jane, from, you know her if I,
from 30 Rock?
What?
From 30 Rock? Jane
who is that?
I think Jane.
Yes. Yeah. So, I have I keep flashing through who I might like it, but then I try to keep that under wraps because I don't want to hope too much because I would just love this to be a movie. It would be so fun.
If there's any film producers out there listening, I'm telling you, this would be a great movie.
I know.
Good.
I pitched it as Little Miss Sunshine meets Thelma and Louise.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because it is kind of this wacky journey.
Yeah. But Kristen Wiig, if she's going to be Summer, we have to make her blonde, right?
Yeah, she has to be blonde.
Yeah.
Yep. Sure. I know. And I think she might be too tall for the part.
You really thought about this. So serious.
Sorry, I have. Yes.
Another question from the audience here. Do you think women are more or less supportive of each other today than in previous decades. Is there more they can do?
I have got some words for you on this one. Well, here's the thing. So the reason that the tall poppy writers are called the tall poppy writers is because when there is a field of flowers, if one grows higher than the others, genetically, they cut it off because, flower sellers and marketers, they all want all the flowers to be the same length. And that became a social theory and a way to talk about what women do to other women when one woman grows taller than the other. The idea is they come in and cut them down. And it's called the tall poppy syndrome. And so when I built the tall poppies, I wanted to think about flipping that. Right. And so that everybody gets to grow, that we can have more than one tall poppy, that there isn't any zero end game there. So do I think that women are more supportive of less over the years? I think there's a couple of things that are probably happening. I think that as women find their voices, some women are very uncomfortable with those voices, especially if they grew up in a place where their voices were less supportive. And so I think that we're in a place here where we have a lot, and here I am again, my daughter she's in women's studies and all we do is talk about the patriarchy now because she's had 17 papers to write on the patriarchy. But I do believe that women are as much a part of the patriarchy as men are. We have been grown up in that. We value women less. We do. We can't help it even in itself. I've been taught that maybe women are less supportive, and I don't believe that's true. I think, like I said, at our very base, what we really want to do is care for people and take care of them. But we've been brought up in a world of competition, and so we're constantly fighting with ourselves in terms of, I want to support her, but she's getting ahead of me. Is that a bad thing? And, I've always said, but that's never true, right? There's many, many slots. Everyone can succeed. We're just not going to all do it today. There's plenty of time.
Right.
And so I sort of feel like I would like to say that we're getting better, but I think we have to get over a hump here.
Yes.
And decide that, that what's good for one of us is good for all of us. It's like why I feel very strongly about readership. Like we're not competing for the readers. If there's readers and they love to read, that's good for everyone. And if they don't want to read my book, but they want to read my friend's book, that's great. That means we still need books.
Right.
So, that's a hard question. It's a hard question to answer, but I think basically women are, honestly, I love women so much because I think they're so strong and amazing. So I think if you really drill down into a woman, you find someone that's really loving and caring, and they're careful.
Well, it's interesting because in your book, Holly could be described as a very difficult woman.
Incredibly
but then
difficult.
When you dig down into it, she's not. She's just hurt and she's covering.
Yeah.
And
she's
really
protecting herself.
The way we judge each other.
Yeah.
Without really knowing what's behind whatever we're seeing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I think we do that all the time. And I always say this, that someone else's success is just their success. It doesn't have anything to do with me. It doesn't mean I was lazy. It doesn't mean that I am not as good as that person. It just means that we all made different choices. And many of us had different opportunities given at different times.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think this idea, it's very hard not to compare yourself. I understand that. And in fact, when you were reading my bio, I was thinking to myself, oh my God, that bio is the kind of bio of the most irritating woman in the world. Like, because there's so much in it. But when I was younger, I would read those bios and think, good God, how do they do that? Well, they aged. I aged.
You're right.
And I had time, right?
Throughout a lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one last question. Do we have another question? Oh, okay. At what age did you feel being a woman was important to you?
Wow. Holy cow. I bet 40. No, right? Like 40 or 50. I think 40 or 50. I think I didn't really realize. I mean, I never wanted to be anything other than what I was. But I think that for me, I didn't really start to see the true value of being a woman until I was later. And I had a moment to think about it. So I have to say, I think later.
Yeah, that's probably true for most of us.
Yeah. I think that you don't even understand your own value. You're sort of consumed for so many years.
Yeah, with survival and day to day.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So I think it takes a while to figure, you know, I used to hear people say, you know, 50 was my best year, or things didn't really get good until I was 60. And I'd think, you're lying. And now I think, oh my God, they weren't lying. I thought they were just, you know, saying that because they felt bad about aging.
It just keeps getting better, baby. We're like,
it does get better. It really does. I mean, yeah, my belly doesn't get better, but the rest of it does. Gets better.
Oh, I could chat for about 100 more hours, but unfortunately, we are just about out of time. We have links in the chat for the best place for you to buy this book.
Thank you.
I thought you said this would work. Please buy it. You won't regret it. It's a really funny, great book. Dr. Anne Garvin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. I had the best time.
And thank you to our amazing behind-the-scenes producers, Tom Champeau and Julie Gerstenblatt. They've been making the magic work back there, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone who tuned in today. We'll see you next time on